Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast. And today, there's some big news for Pauper. We're making a banned and restricted announcement. Last time, I ran through all the changes from us on the Pauper format panel, and so I wanted to do the same thing here and explain what's happening this time, why we're making the changes, and what you can expect in the future. Ready? Let's go. First of all, I want to say that we on the PFP are overall quite happy with the last round of changes. We've been monitoring the format every week and have been happy seeing increased player numbers and diversity in Magic Online leagues, challenges, and anecdotally, from the limited real-world play opportunities there are right now. From mono black control to mono green stompy and everything in between, it's been an exciting time to be a Pauper player. However, with the release of Kamigawa, there's a new deck to address, and we've had enough time to watch things develop to make some other changes. Let me walk through them. I'll begin by talking about Storm. Storm cards have a long and storied history of getting the axe in Pauper. When Modern Horizons 2 hit, all eyes were on its new Storm cards, and it didn't take long until Chatterstorm and Galvanic Relay were tearing up the format. After the ban of Chatterstorm, Galvanic Relay was a powerhouse without a strong enough home. However, the introduction of Experimental Synthesizer in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, especially when backed up by Deadly Dispute, was the missing piece to reopen this can of worms. In short order, Black-Red Storm has climbed to the top of the format. Now, I want to say that we on the PFP don't believe Storm existing in the format is inherently a bad thing. Decks like the Reaping the Graves based Cycling Storm or the Weather the Storm combo decks with Marauding Blight Priest have seen success. Bryant Cook won a Magic Online challenge just a few weeks ago with the former. These are decks at a power level that is more reasonable and have additional avenues for interaction. For example, Graveyard Hate against Cycling Storm. However, the problem comes when the deck is quick, powerful, and difficult to interact with. This new Black-Red Storm deck is all of those, and has been boasting a win rate accordingly. Looking at the data, it has the highest win rate in the format by a large margin. We gave it a little time for the metagame to settle and see if people found a solution, but that doesn't seem to be the case at this point. It was clear action needed to be taken. While Relay was the obvious card, it's important to investigate all the options. The first up is the Ritual package: Rite of Flame, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Lotus Petal, and so on. These kinds of cards are almost always up to no good. You could definitely argue that banning them and cutting off Storm entirely is something that would save the format substantial grief over time. While it is an interesting discussion, a lot of people also enjoy these cards for that legacy feel Pauper often has. And, as mentioned above, having access to less powerful Storm decks we think can be fine for the metagame and even attract players. These cards are safe. For now anyway. Second, we looked at the new card that broke Relay's back here, Experimental Synthesizer. This card has seen play all over the place in Pauper in a short amount of time. Synthesizer is strong, but it's also enabling some strategies which look healthy and fun, like a red-white aggressive deck, which uses it alongside Glinthawk and Core Skyfisher. While it is a card we have our eye on and wouldn't be afraid to ban if it got too ubiquitous, the fact remains that all that really does is send Galvanic Relay back to being just one card away from a problem. Banning Synthesizer means that every time a new card gives Relay the juice it needs, we need to axe that card. We don't think it's right to try and play whack-a-mole with this one. Synthesizer is safe for now. Finally, you could talk about waiting even longer to see what happens and if the metagame develops ways to counter the deck. However, at this point, all signs point to this deck being dominant. We'd rather nip it in the bud proactively before it causes Pauper health to become stagnant. As such, Galvanic Relay is banned. After Relay, there's another deck we wanted to go back to and chat about again, Affinity. Before banning ATOG, there was a lot of discussion on the PFP around if we should ban ATOG and Disciple of the Vault, or just ATOG. Eventually, just ATOG won out, with the understanding that we could wait and see what happened, and then see if we needed to act on Disciple. it was hard to predict what shape and results Affinity would put up. After watching the metagame evolve, it was pretty clear immediately that Affinity was far from gone without Atog. It was still the most played deck and one of the best performing in leagues and challenges. In fact, even right now, Affinity remains the most popular deck in leagues by close to twice the next most popular deck of Black-Red Storm, regardless of the fact that Black-Red Storm's win rate is substantially higher. Affinity remained strong throughout the post-ban pre-Kamigawa period. Then, with Kamigawa, picked up access to both Experimental Synthesizer and Reckoner's Bargain. While neither is crucial to the strategy, they are two additional pickups which certainly benefit the deck, both providing additional draw power and, in the case of Bargain, stabilization against other aggressive decks. Now, Affinity is a deck we like having existing. It's a popular deck, and it's also great for metagame evolution. Since it is so hateable, Affinity being strong causes a natural metagame evolution from week to week depending on how much Affinity hate people are playing. However, we think it's at its best for the format when it's attacking with discounted creatures and grinding out long games with its array of card advantage, as opposed to having access to huge swaths of burst damage. With Atog down, people have even begun to use cards like Krark Clan Shaman, really leaning into combining that with a couple disciples to kill your opponent in one fell swoop. And for those wondering how that works, you can repeatedly activate the Shaman before the first ability would kill your disciples. We took a look into the data, and in addition to what I mentioned above about it being the most played and one of the best performing decks, there was another concerning factor. It was actually disadvantaged against the Storm decks. The fact that the deck still had a high win rate, despite the next most popular deck being an unfavorable matchup, is both meaningful and concerning. Without that deck around, that's one less unfavored matchup to worry about. While decks can reclaim sideboard slots to fight Affinity with Relay Storm gone, it's not clear that's enough. So we on the PFP reopened the discussion. We talked about bridges again. We weren't afraid to ban them, but reached a similar conclusion to last time. They're enabling one of the format's only viable control decks, thanks to their synergy with Cleansing Wildfire, and if we tried doing a surgical approach of banning just one or two bridges, there's no guarantee that would actually solve the problem. The untapped artifact lands are another option, but that's just another surgical approach. Plus, those are cards which actually do open the deck up to hate, like Gorilla Shaman. The lands are safe for now. The largest discussion came around Deadly Dispute. This card has been incredible in Affinity, providing additional draw power, an artifact back, and even lets you sacrifice your synthesizers. The raw card advantage the deck has right now is impressive. However, we are okay with long game card advantage. It's not problematic to continue to find creatures to keep you stable in the long game. It is more problematic if you're using all the draw to dig for your game-ending Disciple turn. Dispute remains on our radar as something to watch, given both its strength here and how it's shown up in other decks. Additionally, to borrow a term I picked up off of Patrick Sullivan, Deadly Dispute has a low value over replacement, meaning that there are a lot of other cards which do similar things. Maybe you switch to the full set of synthesizers and bargains, for example. It's not clear touching it does as much. On the other hand, Disciple of the Vault has a high value over replacement. It's unlikely you're going to see an effect like this again at 1 mana, and there isn't a good substitute. To make a meaningful impact, it makes a lot more sense to hit Disciple. So we're banning Disciple of the Vault. When we banned Atog, people speculated it would kill Affinity. However, in reality, it wasn't even close to dead and took almost no time to recover, putting mini copies into the very next challenge. This time around, with Disciple gone, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a similar trajectory. It is certainly a big ding to the deck, but the deck has so much in the way of card advantage and access to other discounted creatures like Gearseeker Serpent, Carapace Forger, the ability to play additional synthesizers, and more, that it should be able to rebuild and still be a contender, just not at the same play rate as before. Speaking of large creatures, one last thing to touch on. When it comes to Sojourner's Companion, unbanning it is on the table if it looks like Affinity needs the help in the future, as it does play into this creature strategy well, though we have to be careful given the addition of Blood Fountain, which is very good at discounting expensive Affinity spells. However, there's a good chance Affinity won't need the help. For a long time, Affinity and Pauper didn't play Disciple of the Vault, and we look forward to seeing what it looks like next without this card. And now, for something different, an unban. Last time around, we banned Bonder's Ornament and Prophetic Prism. targeting the Tron decks. Overall, we've been very happy with this. Reducing Tron's power has really opened up the format, because the pressure to win quickly or having Tron crush you under its mana and card advantage is no longer present. We would rather live in this strength of Tron than the previous level. However, we would also be happier to see a little more Tron than we do now. Constant threat of Tron at the top of the metagame is unideal, but knowing that it's there and you could face it is something we believe to be healthy. We don't want to touch Ornament or Prism, as that's too much, but thought Expedition Map could come back. If it gives Tron a small boost, great. If it doesn't impact Tron's play numbers, then we don't expect to do much more. When Expedition Map was originally banned, its impact on the Tron deck ended up being minimal. This unban is a little more important in a post-Prism and Ornament ban world, because Tron can also search for colors they need to help cast their cards, a minor but relevant gameplay detail. We also think that with this improving people's ability to hit Tron early, but without the mana fixing of Prism and Ornament, it might help us see different Tron decks than we did before, such as 2 or 3 colored Tron decks. Finally, Affinity's long game reach with Disciple of the Vault had been a problem for Tron in the past because of how much it relied on Moment's Peace. By knocking Disciple, that helps Tron as well in conjunction with this unban. So Expedition Map is unbanned. Now, before ending, I want to note that these were not the only decks we looked at. We looked at everything, especially decks which picked up new tools in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Moon Circuit Hacker was a card we were initially really worried about. While it still has our attention, Fairies does not appear to be a problem currently. It's a solid deck to play, but nothing that necessitates action at this time. Similarly, the red-white decks on the back of Monarch continue to be powerful, especially with the pickup of Experimental Synthesizer, but we don't see enough evidence to touch Monarch at this time. That said, these bans and unbans will change the format and viability of these strategies. We'll be watching closely in the next several weeks. Barring anything which feels like an emergency, if there are any additional changes to the format, you can probably expect them sometime after we see the results of adding in Streets of New Capenna. Thank you for watching and playing Pauper. On behalf of the Pauper format panel, if you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. I'll talk with you again soon, and in the meantime, may you have fun with Pauper. You got this. First of all, it helps solve that problem of keeping the game moving. If creatures are getting goaded, there's going to be attacking. And by having one creature forced to attack, often it will convince people to attack with more, or use a combat trick to help their creature get through. Plus, once that creature is tapped,